Welcome back to Sports Rule Pod. I'm Nick Elam. Here we explore innovations in sports and the journeys of individuals who make sports great. You can find Sports Rule Pod on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. And there are many ways to engage with the podcast. You can do so by email, nick.elam@sportsrulepod.com, or YouTube, X, or Instagram @sportsrulepod. In the interview segment, we're joined by Coach Seth Greenberg, who is one of the most recognizable college basketball analysts on ESPN, and before that, a decorated coach for many years. And Coach Greenberg will share his thoughts on NCAA Tournament expansion. And as we discuss his coaching career, he'll also share many of the life lessons that he shared with his players and that they shared with him. And he'll speak candidly about the dynamics that he had with his own supervisors. In the innovation segment, we'll explore the 3-2-1 draft lottery system, a much debated proposal to address tanking in the NBA. And in the next to last segment, we revisit what could be considered the greatest spectacle in the history of baseball, the 2026 World Baseball Classic semifinal game between the United States and the Dominican Republic. Let's get to it. We are so fortunate to be joined today by Coach Seth Greenberg. Since 2012, has been one of the leading college basketball analysts on ESPN, and before that had a long career as a coach, including stops at Virginia Tech, where he won the ACC Coach of the Year twice, and also University of South Florida, where he won Conference USA Coach of the Year, and even before that at Long Beach State as head coach, coming after stints as an assistant coach. Coach Greenberg, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, brother. How you been?
I've been great. And so take us through some of the behind the scenes of what it's like to be a college basketball analyst for ESPN. And we see you during the season. We see you just about everywhere, whether that's on site at College Game Day or in studio, or even doing quick hits on various ESPN studio shows. So what's a typical week like for you during college basketball season?
It all depends on the time of the year. Like early in the season, you have feast week. It's a long day because, during feast week, you have all those different tournaments and they start at noontime. They end on the West Coast a lot of times. So you could be putting in 12-hour days, but it's the stuff before you get on the air that's really the important time. Like anything you do, preparation is the most important thing. I don't care what you do in life. I don't care what your profession is. If you're not prepared, if you don't put in the work, if you don't stack days, if you don't remain focused on the process, then you can only be so good. So like I start in June, especially now with the portal and everything, I start in June getting prepared for the season. I've actually started earlier this year a little bit. But the reason being is because you don't want to be looking at notes and answering questions or talking about teams. You want to be able to have enough information where you can just basically talk like you're in a bar talking ball. So it starts early in the summer. It starts by breaking down every single team in every major conference, strengths, weaknesses, additions, subtractions, analytics, key players, style of play, so that when you get into the time, like say November, let's see, early, which is early in the season, then I'll go watch about 15, 20 teams practice during that fall period, from like say the 1st of October to the start of the season. The season starts earlier and earlier every year, but so you get your hands on, you're talking to coaches all day. You're going to practices, you're talking to coaches, you're getting insight. You're just trying to kind of build your mental library of who they are and how they win of each specific team. So you do your background work, and then come November, you really dig into Feast Week, which is really good because it gives us a chance to see a lot of teams in a short period of time because there are so many games. So you're watching game after game after game. You're prepared for those games. You're doing film work prior to it. You're watching preseason games. So November's a busy time. Now we get into December. That's bowl time. So we're not as busy except for maybe the early season league games, and then we're got a pretty good schedule. Start January. It's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in the studio. We don't start College Game Day until after the college football playoffs. So it's usually Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, which is usually a long day in the studio. And then once the football playoffs are over with, then it gets real. And then it gets really real during championship week on to the end of the season because, those are really long days, but fun days. And it's not too difficult. We're not curing cancer. We're just watching ball and reacting to games.
And it does not surprise me one bit that you're one of the most prepared analysts on ESPN. And you talked about some of the preparation on a big picture scale. But sometimes you have to prepare in a matter of minutes if you're doing a halftime show or something like that, being able to comment on different games going on. So if you only have a few minutes to watch a bit of a basketball game and then you're expected to comment on it, what are some of the things that you look for or you're noticing in that short amount of time?
Well, it's interesting because when you're in the studio, there's multiple games going on. You're focusing mainly on the game that's on your air at that point. So say it's a 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 11 o'clock window. So basically, that first halftime, you're going to do a preview of the 9 o'clock window, which is obviously pre-preparation. You're going to react to maybe one or two of the games that are going on right then. That's the hard thing because you can react to your game. Sometimes we only react to our game at the 4 minute mark left in the first half. They'll say, we got too many other good games going on. We got to spread the wealth a little bit. So you'll try to get some type of interaction with the person calling that game. Uh, Sometimes right out of the halftime, you'll have a chance to make one comment. But then you've also got to be locked in, and that's where the preparation comes in, onto like the two or three biggest games that are going on in that same window. So you're watching. It's hard to watch them all, but you're watching them. You're following game casts, and you're following stats, and you're following some different things while you're kind of watching multiple screens, taking notes. And then you look. We have 6 minutes at halftime. We have 2 3 minute segments, and then that C segment could be if it's a promo. We might have 15 seconds. So it's literally, and if you're with someone else besides your host, you basically got 3 minutes. It's not a lot of time. So you're gonna have two highlights in the A's. So that's going to take up time. So you try to find something to give people something to watch, like that, especially for the preview. We're going to preview the second game. Give them one thing to watch, or watch this matchup. Watch this style of play. Can that team impose their identity on the game? Uh, you know, can this team control the tempo of the game? What are they going to do defensively against this player? So and so shoots 47% of the shots from the 3 point line. You know, how are they going to be able to run them off the 3 point line? Or this team's a great offensive rebounding team. Most important thing is these two guys, they got to come off the glass. So we're trying to hold the audience. Is basically what we're doing in between games and between halves. So we're setting a stage to just really get people locked into watch this for the next game, or watch this within our game, or in this game that's being played not on our air is a really big game because of X. So you're just trying to give some people something to hang on to.
When you joined ESPN in 2012 and in the years that followed after your coaching career, who were some of the mentors that you had at ESPN, and what was some of the advice that they shared with you?
The greatest mentors were not the talent. I mean, be yourself. I'm talking ball. I've talked ball my whole life. If you think about it, I mean, that's what you do. But like our producers, our directors, the research guys, they're the best because all they want you to do is have a good show. So, I mean, like for me, a person that looks at things a little through a different prism, like if I was coaching, I'd have four things I'm going to give my team at halftime that we got to improve on: two offensively, two defensively. We don't have time for that. So, like, lead with the headline, back it up, and get out of the way. Basically, that's what you have time for. Make a statement, put a bow on it and get out of the way. So, I mean, the best advice you get is, keep it tighter, which is not one of my greatest traits, to be honest with you, because I'm looking at the game, I'm looking at everything that's going on, and my mind is percolating, and it's just, it's different for me. But the people that give you the best advice are the people that are sitting in the chairs that are listening to us, and they've been doing it for years and years and years. And I had really a lot of good mentors, that produce our half times. Those guys are incredibly good people.
And you're a coach at heart, and you've been a mainstay at ESPN for long enough now that I wonder, have you been a mentor to someone at ESPN at this point?
Yeah, I try to mentor all the. I'm a big believer in mentors. I think everyone has to have someone who's invested in their life without asking anything in return. It's a big belief of mine. Terry Holland was my mentor when I went to University of Virginia after getting Logan's let go at Pitt. He hired me on as a graduate assistant and kind of helped me continue to build my career. And from that, he became one of the most influential people in my life. Uh, and just watching him, being around him, listening to him, talking with him. I tell people all the time, I never made a major decision in my life from 83, 84 without consulting him. And and then when he passed a couple of years ago, I actually hosted his memorial service at JPJ along with Ralph Sampson. And Miss Holland asked me to do that, which was one of the greatest honors that I've ever had. So I'm a big believer in mentors. So I try to take all the new guys that come along. I try to kind of talk with them a little bit just about let's have fun, let's make it be conversational, let's give people something to focus on. Whether it's Kevin Keats this past year, who was I have great admiration for, who took NC State to a Final Four and won an ACC Conference Tournament championship, who I've known since he was the coach at Hargrave Military Academy when I was at Virginia Tech, who I think the world of. You just try to, hey, have fun. Don't don't talk TV. We're not TV people. All right, we're basketball coaches. Let's just talk ball.
Now, what you
And
go ahead.
that's what it's all about.
Now, what you're doing now for ESPN, it builds on indirectly, maybe from your time as an undergraduate at Fairleigh Dickinson, where you majored in broadcast journalism. But I'm curious about your playing career at Fairleigh Dickinson. Well, first of all, what made you choose to go to Fairleigh Dickinson? And I'm also curious, what is your greatest moment as a player there?
I wanted to coach, and the coach Fairleigh Dickinson. I was recruited at a mid-major level, but Coach Fairleigh Dickinson was a guy named LoBalbo, who was Bob Knight's assistant at Army, and he was a great high school coach. He was UB Brown's high school coach, and he was one of the originators of ball U-man defense. And he was a little different, a little eccentric. He actually wasn't even a full-time faculty member at Fairleigh Dickinson. He'd drive in from Kitchen High School, but he was a brilliant basketball coach, especially defensively. And I picked Fairleigh Dickinson because I basically majored in coaching basketball. Coach LoBalbo was basically the focal point of my main professor. Uh, and he gave me a great foundation. I did things differently than him in a lot of ways, but similarly in a lot of ways. In fact, he'd always say to me, he'd bring me in his office, and he was a tough guy, and I know you're going to want to coach someday. And I tell you, when you have your own team, you're going to be doing this same shit every single day, just like we did it. And true enough, there are a lot of things that I did every single day. But he was an eccentric guy. He was my first practice at Fairleigh Dickinson. He had 13 chairs lined up. Assistant coach told us to sit down right in the middle of the court. And 5 minutes go by, 10 minutes go by. He's nowhere to be seen. All of a sudden, here comes Coach Lowe. He's wearing these maroon pants. He had really skinny legs, so it looked like he had no legs when he was walking down. He was chewing on a cigar. He had these big ass glasses, and he's walking in front of us, back and forth, and not saying anything. And I'm like, "Holy shit, what the hell's going on here?" And he goes, "Hey, I'm your coach, Al Lowe. I want you to like me, not to love me, because loving leads to screwing, and no one screws with Al LoBalbo." I almost shit my pants. I mean, but he was a different guy, but he gave me a great education. And even when I got into coaching and I was a head coach, when he was still alive, he'd pick up the phone and either say, "Hey, I'm really proud of you," or he would rip me on something that our team wasn't doing well enough, which is pretty funny.
A few follow-ups there. I didn't realize he was Hubie Brown's coach. Hubie Brown's one of my favorites, so that's awesome. And then also the fact that you did not emulate Coach LoBalbo, there's nothing wrong with that. In my work and preparing school leaders, I tell them, surround yourself with leaders, see what they do, notice what they do, but you don't have to necessarily follow that exact style. You find things that you like that you want to follow, things that maybe you don't like that you can do it a different way, but take a little bit from each leader that you surround yourself with and form it into your own style.
You got to coach within your own personality.
Exactly right.
You can't be someone else. You got to be comfortable enough in your own skin and confident enough in your own ways. The biggest thing is consistency, agility. Like I really believe consistency is really important. Anyone can do something once, the very best at whatever they do it over and over and over again. But you also have to have agility because society changes, the world changes, what we do changes, players change. They don't change, but there's a different environment around them. So you've got to have agility, and then how you communicate with people's it changes like very, very differently now today than maybe when I first started in coaching. But you take, like I took a little bit of Coach Allen, Coach Dave Odom, what I learned at Five Star, what I learned from Coach LoBalbo, what I learned from going around and watching other people practice. When I was at Long Beach State, I used to go down and watch Larry Brown practice all the time, and he was very gracious to me and learned a ton from him. So you have smart people. You are your habits. I mean, like in life, you are your habits, and you are your habits, and your investment equals your expectation. Two of my favorite things I live by. Be prepared, work hard, invest in. If you want to be good at something, invest in something. And it's like when coaches, these ads are changing coaches. If you don't invest in, you can change all the coaches you want. If you don't give them resources, then you have no chance to be successful. If you want to be successful at something, you got to invest in it. And as a person, you invest in it personally by your approach, your work ethic, your how you pour into something. So it's the same in what you're doing, and kind of what I grew up through, 33 years of coaching doing.
And I want to take a deep dive into your perspective as a coach, and starting with the kind of the leadership and the practical side of it. And I think maybe you've hinted at some of this, but I want to see what were some of the main messages that you would share with your players when you were a coach?
Well, for our team, it was real simple. The hardest playing, toughest team finds a way to win. That's something that's really, really important. Just got to get to the next play. Got to get next play. You can trust yourself, trust your habits, trust your work, and get to the next play. Every single day, you got to just stack good days on top of each other. One of my other favorite sayings is adversity visits the strong and lives with the weak. We can't get set back. We got to move forward. And how you can't get stuck. And that's how I used to word it. We can't get stuck. We got to get to the next play. To the point where if someone made a mistake, I'd have the other guys point to him and say, next play. And that's the same thing in life. You can't get stuck. So shit's going to happen to you in life. And it's not going to all be good stuff. It's not what happens to you. It's how you respond to it. So having an incredible work ethic, being passionate, being a great teammate, being someone other people can trust, being someone that other people want to partner with. Like you walk in a room, are you someone that other people want to partner with? I mean, because, if you're not, then you're not going to have any team chemistry. The preparation side, we're not, we're not going to be good at 1,000 things. We're going to be good at the things that are most important. Clearly define who you are and how you win individually, collectively was a big thing for me. Your team, I can go watch for practice. I should know that team's identity within 30 minutes of practice. I should know their identity. Like for me, I want to know our team to know who we are and how we win individually and collectively. Like we wanted to be the hardest playing, toughest team. We wanted to be physical. We wanted to be tough on the defensive end. We wanted to be a team other people didn't want to play against. We wanted to be a team that people reacted to. We wanted to be a team that was physical. Offensively, we wanted to take care of the basketball. Our best players were going to get most of the shots. The other guys going to get the shots off the best players. So, I mean, we had a lot of things, but the biggest thing is be a good person, hardest working, toughest team. You are your habits, the consistency of your approach, be a great teammate, and pour yourself into your team. Like as a coach, I got to pour myself into my team. Our players got to pour themselves into each other. They got to develop a true trust and with each other. Because if I don't have a trust in basketball, if I'm worried about that guys behind me aren't going to be able to rotate and help, I'm not going to pressure the ball. Then my defense is going to be ineffective. All right. If I'm not going to make the extra pass, then should I expect the guy on my team to make the extra pass? If I'm not going to set a good screen, then why should, to free someone up, then, why should that person set a great screen for me? I mean, there's got to be a great trust. And then you got to get people to be the best version of themselves, which basically is, embrace your role. What is your role? Where I have some differences with some friends of mine. Your role is your best version of yourself. That's what your role is. And don't be someone that don't worry about the guy sitting next to you. His role is going to be different than yours. As a coach, my job is to put you in a position to be the best version of yourself. So, like when I would send my guys to work out for NBA teams, and their agents would say, "Oh, you got to show them how you shoot the three." They want a 3-point shooter. They're going to find a better 3-point shooter than you. Show them what you do really well. Show them when you're the best, because that's what the NBA is. The NBA is a league of role players. You have 2 or 3 great players, and then you have role players. So uh, those are kind of things that I really emphasize with my guys a lot.
I love all that. I'm ready to run through a wall right now. Now, anyone who's served in a leadership position, you realize pretty quickly that you learn just as much from the people you lead as they might learn from you. So I'm curious, who is a player who you learned a lot from?
I had a lot of players that I learned a lot from. Every step of the way, I had a player at Long Beach State when I was an assistant coach, who's now an attorney, uh, who he would say, "Coach, just patience, patience. Some of these guys don't get it. You need to be patient." Or you, when you coach as long as I did, the greatest thing you learn from your players, even now and before, is like I had a great experience a week ago. It was my 70th birthday, and we were in Florida, and my wife, uh, one of my former players, is in Jacksonville, and um, surprised me for dinner. He came over to surprise me dinner. Jamon Gordon, who was one of my favorite all-time players, and was one of the hardest players I ever had. He was Defensive Player of the Year in the ACC. He helped us build Virginia Tech, where people thought we could be good. And I don't know if it's what you learn from him, but like sometimes you learn that you're reinforcing the right things, because I was really big on teaching our guys to be the best version of themselves, not just as players, as people. So I'd have them come over to the house for dinner so they could see how, because a lot of my guys didn't have two-parent families, how you talk to your wife, how do you talk to your kids, how do you help put them to sleep, how do all those things. And like we were sitting there, and Jamon, and I was tough on that team, man. I was tough. And this is a great example of leadership. And we're about ready to play Duke at home. It's actually a game we ended up winning. And I come back from practice, and we were going to bring our team back at 10 o'clock to do one last film session that night, because it was like a 2 o'clock game next night. And I come home, walk in the door, and my wife goes, "We need to talk." I'm like, "What do we need to talk?" And she goes, "Jamon called. Jamon and Zabian called." I said, "Yeah, okay." They said, "Mrs. Greenberg, we're going to be ready tomorrow. We don't have to come back at 10 o'clock tonight to watch that film for the 17th time. I promise you we'll be ready. We're going to play our asses off." I said, "We'd rather get a good night's sleep and be rested. We're just going to watch the same tape that we just watched, which we watched the day before, which we watched the day before. We're going to get the same matchups. We're going to go over the same scatter report." And he went through the whole he went through the whole thing to Karen, and I come walking in. She goes, "Jamon and Zabian called. They don't need to come back at 10 o'clock. You're wearing them out. They told me they're going to be ready to play. You need to trust them." And sure enough, we came out and we played our asses off and won the game. And like you learn from your players, like sometimes if you have a good locker room, and you're only as good as your locker room, and your locker room could be anything. It could be the principal's office, it could be the superintendent's office, it could be whatever, you know, wherever. Every organization has a locker room, and you're only as good as your locker room. And that was a great lesson for me. Those guys were ready, and they knew they were ready, and they just wanted to, like, sometimes you got to get away from it all. But your locker room is the most important thing. And if you have the wrong voice in your locker room, you're screwed. But if you have a good voice in your locker room that can coach your locker room, that's when you know you have a good team.
All these players that you've formed this wonderful bond with, they don't just magically show up on your roster. You obviously have to recruit them. In your time in recruiting, what is the most exciting or energizing moment that you had? And what was the most deflating or disappointing moment that you had?
Well, disappointing moment is probably Josh Hairston when we were recruiting him, who ended up at Duke. His mom went to Virginia Tech, kid from Virginia, Fredericksburg, Virginia. Great kid, unbelievable family. Love him, still to this day, love him to death. Um, and we recruited. I mean, I would drive to Fredericksburg just to watch him shoot around in the morning, and then get back in the car and drive right back to Blacksburg, which was, I don't know, 2.5 hours. Leave the house like at 4:30, and love the kid and still do. And he's done very, very well. He works for an agent now, and he's an incredible person. But Duke wasn't even recruiting him. And then Coach K was coaching the Olympics. He got back from the Olympics, and he was at one of the summer events. and Josh played really well. And right after the end of the recruiting period, Josh and his family took a visit to Duke and committed. And the way home, had to call me, and that was rough. That was rough. But I mean, look, it worked out for him. He's a great kid, and but Duke's hard to beat in recruiting. It's just the way that's just the way it is. We had we had a lot of, like, the most important thing to me in recruiting was the evaluation part of it. I mean, that people don't understand. The most important part of recruiting is evaluation, because it's kind of like what Coach Sutton said. You recruit the wrong guys. I don't care how talented they are. You recruit the wrong guys, and you're not going to win. So I was really, I think, the recruitment of my kind of guys, probably the one that I wish that got away but didn't get away, was when I got let go at Pitt. We had Montrezl Harrell committed and signed. So I would have had Dorian Finney-Smith, who still played in the NBA, Montrezl Harrell, who was won a college championship, Joel Eddy, who played in the NBA, Eric Green, who played in the NBA. I would have had my best team ever at Virginia Tech. And to this day, I actually got a text message from Montrezl's dad, just actually this morning, which was kind of cool. So, look, uh, every time you sign a kid that you really invested a lot of time in, and you develop a relationship and a rapport with, whether it's Jamon Gordon or Xavier Dowdell or Malcolm Delaney or whomever that played for me all through all those years, Lucius Harris, Brian Russell. I mean, I think the coolest thing is, and people don't understand that, your manager is your most valuable asset sometimes in on your team. And like my manager from Long Beach State, Michael Fong, who actually in the podcast, he's crazy in the back, but we have text change with all those guys on the text chain. And like Fong's like the ringleader. And like he's been to two of my daughter's weddings. I mean, that's, and same thing in South Florida. We got text chain with all our South Florida guys. And same thing with, Virginia Tech. And those are the reasons why you coach, because you're constantly staying in contact with family, and that's like today. There's guys that do this Big East Rewind um uh, podcast. Uh, a guy from Villanova and a guy from Syracuse too, Sonny and Everson, and so he wants to do more podcasts with some of the Pitt guys when I coached in Pitt as an assistant coach. So I said, well, you got to have Joey David, you got to have this guy, and Keith Armstrong, who was another big guy that played for me at Pitt when I was an assistant. He chimed in, Coach, what's going on? But I mean, it's that kind of stuff. That's why you coach. Like people don't understand. You don't coach. You coach in a moment to win games. You coach in the moment on a daily basis to change lives and build bridges for other people across, to have a chance to be, good husbands and good fathers and successful people. But in the big picture, the reward of coaching is, as a 70-year-old, still being in contact with these guys and seeing them as parents, as successful. That's the reward of coaching. Because if it's just wins and losses, then you know we always said in recruiting, it's 4 for 40, 4 years for basically the next 40 years of your life. That's what coaching's all about, and that's what mentoring's all about. And that's why, when I got to coaching, there was no money. Guys are making a shit ton of money right now, but there was no money when I got into it. I got into coaching just because I was impacted by my coaches.
And basketball is a family, certainly all the people on your own program, but even extending into other programs and other coaches. And thinking about as games end and you have those post-game handshake exchanges, is there an exchange that you can remember that sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, I don't know. There, like, post game handshakes are funny. I mean, like you have good friends, but like really good friends, you'll get the bro hug. Guys that you really don't like. Some guys will give you the wet fish. Some Coach K gave you the shoulder pat. He gave you the Roy Williams gave you the grip, where he'd grip your hand and tell you, oh, we just played so well. You got us on the wrong day. I mean, but I mean, yeah, your friend, like what happens in most of those things is, you do what you do in the post game. Then when you get in the tunnel, you'll visit with the guy, or the next day you'll pick up the phone. But what I did do when I was coaching is, I had a group of guys that we grew up in coaching together, that we used to have clinics every single fall and before the season where everyone was assigned something, about 8 or 10 guys that pretty much the same age, chasing the same dreams. And like those guys from 21 years old to 70, we still stay in touch, which is important. But like you're fiercely competitive in everything you do in coaching, like whether it's recruiting or whether it's playing a game. And, those things are important, but they should not break down relationships. Like some of my, still to this day, like Tom Izzo, John Calipari, these guys, we all grew up in this business together and a lot. So, and they've become, lifelong friends. And then back in the day when Nike used to have the coaches trips, you were around those same guys. So it was fun to see these, relationships change. Like I'm going to Coach Vital's dinner, leaving actually Wednesday, and they're honoring Tom Izzo. And, like Tom and Lupe will be there. That'll be fun. And one of the reasons we go is to catch up to a lot of people that we haven't seen. Or my daughter played volleyball at Villanova. Jay Wright's her dear friend. And he was so gracious to be, kind of check up on her when she was playing volleyball at Villanova. And like I texted with him 2 days ago, and last thing goes, "How's my girl Jackie G?" I mean, that's what those are the great lifelong bonds you get in coaching.
Now, in the early chapters of your career, you were an assistant coach at Columbia and Pittsburgh and Virginia, which, when you combine that with your head coaching stops, you've truly been all over the map geographically. During those times as assistant coach, what's a lesson that you learned that you were able to carry into your head coaching career?
Uh, Patience, probably. I think I learned that a little bit from Coach Holland. You got to work with people who have the same vision as you. I learned that a little bit. I think that's really, really important. Like the job's too hard that you've got to make sure you're working with people that share your vision and share your energy and your passion and your ownership. Um, I worked for Buddy Mahar at Columbia. I literally didn't know what I didn't know, but it was a great opportunity. Working in the Ivy League was great because you did everything. I coached a JV team. I swept the floor. We did laundry. We did a little bit of everything. So that was a great experience for sure. University of Pittsburgh, Roy Chipman was a little bit different, but we were moving into the Big East from the Atlantic 10 or Eastern 8 at that point. He was a very, very smart guy that very successful at Lafayette and kind of outside the box thinker in some things he did. Coach Holland was the most balanced person I've been around. Crazy, crazy competitive, along with Dave Odom. That was a great relationship. Bill Foster was a program builder when I was at Miami, and we started that program from scratch. He also started a program at Charlotte from scratch. So I learned, the whole idea of putting together uh, a team from scratch, which was a great experience because when you become a head coach, you're basically starting from scratch. So you learn, you try to, anyone can teach you a lesson. It doesn't have to be something. It could be an assistant coach you worked with. It could be, someone that you just have a conversation with. I mean, you can learn lessons from about anyone if you just listen and the conversations go in the right direction.
We're here with Coach Seth Greenberg. Those assistant coach stints then led to your first head coaching stint at Long Beach State beginning in 1990. When you got hired for that job in your first head coaching job at the D1 level, who was the first person that you told?
My wife. I mean, I was an assistant coach on a staff, and Corey Johnson was the athletic director. He was with me at the University of Miami. And I kind of had a feeling if we were successful. Joe Harrington took the Colorado job. I got the for all $62,000 a year. I was the head coach at Long Beach State, and I was a terrible first year head coach. Full disclosure, I tried to do too many things. I didn't delegate enough. I wasn't as focused on let's get good at X, Y, and Z. And it was a good learning experience for me. And maybe if I was at another place, I might not have got to my second year. But the second year, I got really focused on exactly who we were and how we win and what's most important and type of players we needed. And fortunate enough to turn things around the next year. And then the following year, we had a great year. We beat Kansas when they were number one in the country, and we had it going from there.
Now, I have a more interest probably than most people in the job interview process in lots of different fields, but I don't have much knowledge of what that's like for a college basketball head coach. I'm curious whether it was for your job at Long Beach State or your coaching job at South Florida or Virginia Tech, wherever it was. What was the approach for the job interview process? What was it like?
You know what? I didn't really go through a whole lot of interviews, to be honest with you. At Long Beach State, I'd been working there for 3 years. We rebuilt the program from the worst program in the Big West to being really good. They knew who we were. I knew who they were. The AD we had a good relationship with, and that was pretty easy. Paul Griffin, my AD at South Florida, was just the best. I love him to death. He's just a great man. That was more of he's a New York guy, Long Island guy. I'm a New York Long Island guy. He coached at Roanoke, won a national championship in lacrosse. He was we had a little bit of a bond. I had sent him my vision. It was literally, I think it was almost handwritten, that I sent to him on how I'd recruit, how we'd approach the job, how we wanted to play. We just hit it off. We met in New York City during the Final Four, when Final Four was in New Jersey. My three daughters sat out in the hallway of my mom's apartment building. I sat with Paul in her apartment. Girls were running around. They're all now 38, 39, 35, and 33. And we just hit it off. We hit it off. We were kind of on the same page. And then Virginia Tech, the same thing. It was kind of just Jim Weaver was going through trying to figure out, what they were looking for. I had a guy at that point that represented me a little bit, but not a whole lot, because he was suing Virginia Tech because he produced a game at Virginia Tech where he had that lightning bolt. The game was canceled, so that couldn't work. But so I didn't have to overly really interview. Interviewed for my assistant coaching jobs, but not for my head coaching jobs. We won enough where we were in demand.
The record speaks for itself. There you go. You mentioned some of your ADs. What makes a good college athletic director?
Great communicator. The job as a head coach is too difficult if you're fighting with your AD every day. Got to be on the same page, plain and simple. I mean, ADs can't be jealous of the notoriety a head coach gets. The AD should embrace the notoriety of a head coach gets, because that means he's winning. But there's also going to be communication, and a head coach everything can't be the most important thing, because the AD's basically overseeing 10, 15 programs, and obviously they're going to prioritize their revenue sports in a certain way in terms of relationships. But the most important thing is, the job is too hard for the AD, and the job is too hard for the head coach. If they are not on the same page, it's toxic. And that's where the trust comes. Like my last few years at Virginia Tech, we were not on the same page, plain and simple. And it was, and not on my behalf, I can tell you that much. It was not a healthy situation. And you got to make sure you're connected at the hip. AD and the head coach have to be connected at the hip. AD and the sports supervisor have to be connected at the hip. I mean, there cannot be even an inkling of it. Doesn't mean you can't disagree. Doesn't mean you can't argue. But when you walk out of the room, you have to have each other's backs. All right? Because if you don't have each other's backs, then it becomes a toxic situation and no one wins.
And when your time at Virginia Tech came to an end, where were you? How did you find out? How much of a surprise was it to you when you got that news?
I was totally shocked. I was sitting at a luncheon with Carilion Hospital, who was one of the sponsors of this pink ribbon luncheon that my wife put on with a group of other ladies in Roanoke for American Cancer Society. And it was a kind of a thank you lunch. I didn't even have my phone, and it was kind of how to get my wife. I found out I came back. I had a recruit on campus, and we had to. So I didn't know. I came back. I turned my phone. My phone's buzzing and buzzing, buzzing, and all of a sudden I get a phone call to come to the AD's office, and that's kind of when I had a feeling something was wrong. I had to get the recruit off campus. I had to call my wife. She had to get my youngest daughter out of school before she found out. My middle daughter was in her lecture class. She found out before me. It was not a It was an embarrassment to leadership. See, but you got to understand. I have a firm belief. Athletic director administration has a right to fire someone. No problem with that. If you don't, you think you need to make a change, it's your right to make. That's why you have a contract. But it's how you do that. That's the key, and I'll leave it at that.
So your time at Virginia Tech comes to an end, but that at the moment doesn't necessarily mean that your coaching career comes to an end. At what point past that did you know that your coaching career was done and that you were into a different chapter for good?
I Until like the last 2 years, I had opportunities, but and now I'm 70 years old, so I think I'd be 100% better than I ever was. And I got more energy than 40-year-olds, but I stayed doing what I'm doing right now because of the people I was working with. I was The thing about ESPN, especially then, is all everyone wanted to do is for you to have a good show. Everyone was on the same team. Everyone was pulling in the same direction. Everyone was in it together, and that it was an incredible team. Incredible team. Now ESPN's a little more corporate right now. It's a little different, but still, the people you work with are as important as what you do, and you gotta love what you're doing. But you can love what you're doing, but if it's not with people you really enjoy, and I've really enjoyed the people I work with, and my daughters think it saved years of my life, but most importantly, it's the people you work with. I work with really good people. I mean, like really good people, and I enjoy them. Um, so therefore, I enjoy what I'm doing even that much more. Whether it's the Jays or Reese Davis or Kevin Connors, Kevin Nagandi, our producers, our directors, our research people, the people behind the cameras. They're all incredibly professional, really good people, like people that you would do anything for because they would do anything for you. So really, really fortunate in that way.
Coming down the stretch here with Coach Seth Greenberg, and I appreciate you being so generous with your time. And one thing I'll do that I should have done the first time you mentioned it, I'll wish you a late happy 70th birthday.
That's all right.
But
I'm done counting.
but now that you have been on the media side for as long as you have, thinking back to your interactions with media as a coach, do you feel like you handled media well when you were a coach? Would you change anything now that you've seen it from a different perspective?
I was pretty accessible. I'd goof around with some of the guys a little bit, but I had a good relationship. Like my beat writer at Long Beach State helped me find Brian Russell. I had the guys that covered me at one point at Virginia Tech. I used to do clinics for in my office in this springtime, so they understood what they were watching. I mean, I could be a pain in the ass in a post game press conference. I mean, I had a guy that covered me in Roanoke, Mark Berman, who I have so much respect for now. But like we were like an act because he'd always like ask me questions, and if someone asked me a question I didn't want to answer, I would just say what I wanted to say. That's just the way it is. I wasn't going to throw any players under the bus and things like that. So Mark would always ask me the same question, but he would do it like 17 different ways. And finally, I have to say, Burp, you can answer any way you want. I'm going to give you this answer, But he's become a really good friend. So I've always been available, and I've been honest. I don't really look myself as a quote. I'm a basketball coach that gets an opportunity to be a voice of college basketball in an incredible platform. But I couldn't write 3 paragraphs like those people. But I have a point of reference on what I'm talking about that's different than most people.
Obviously, the landscape in college basketball has changed and is changing rapidly. Is there any part of you that wishes that the current player compensation rules, transfer rules, eligibility rules existed while you were coach, or are you happy that things were different at that time?
I think you just got to have agility. I've said, well, it would drive you crazy. It would. I mean, I speak to coaches, it drives them crazy, but like you got to make a choice. Fight, flee, or flow. We've got to get this thing under control. There's no guardrails. So I love when people say, "Well, it's professional sports." Well, there's professional sports. Name me another professional sports that has year-to-year free agency. Name me another professional sport that doesn't have buyouts. Name me another professional sports that no one knows. Is it 5 years? Is it 4 years? Is it, you can be professional and then come back? I mean, like, we just don't have our rule. We have to get some guardrails. But I think you just got to have agility. And if you spend energy fighting it, you got to figure out what you're comfortable doing. Plain and simple. All right. Like, investment equals expectation. Is your institution willing to make the investment you need to stay competitive? I mean, you are your habits, right? You are your core beliefs, your non-negotiables. All right. You still have to have those. And then there's got to be accountability. I don't care how much you're paying a kid. If he's not playing hard, you can't play his ass. Plain and simple. And like, well, wait a second. If I coach that guy hard to try to help him get better, he might transfer. Well, if you don't coach him hard to help him get better, then he's not helping you win anyway. So I think I would coach my team hard. So once the deal is done, all right, that's over with. We're not renegotiating in the middle of the year. That's over with. Now it's about the best players and the people that give us the greatest chance to win. Now, look, that means have I made some bad investments? Those boosters that I'm going to get that money, they'll be on my ass because I did a bad. What I said about most important part of recruiting is evaluation. Got to do a good job evaluating. But I think I would have the agility to deal with it. There's parts of it that's crazy. I mean, I was just with a very prominent head coach this past weekend, and it's crazy out there. The numbers are monopoly numbers. Yet if those same players who are not NBA players, but they're good college players, went and played professionally, they'd be in the G League or they'd be in Europe. But the name on the front of the jersey, all right, has helped create revenue for the name on the back of the jersey. Because, the NBA is the most exclusive club in the world. There's only a certain amount of spots in the NBA. So all these players that are making $3 and $4 million a year, and look, they're helping their college teams win. You hope. All right. A lot of those guys aren't NBA players. That's just a fact. And think about the number of guys like, there's dozens of players that made obscene amounts of money. And I'm all for the players getting paid. I got no problem with it. But we've got to have some guardrails. Got to have some guardrails. We've got the between free agency and the portal. It's like, where's the education aspect of it? We've got to get education back in the equation. We've got to get graduation. We've got to find mentors for these young people. We got to give them a chance to, when they take the ball away, to have a chance to be successful. We've got to teach them how to manage their money. We've got to educate them on all of these things to make sure that, like, if you go to 4 schools in 4 years, where do you go back to when you have a family? Or when you didn't graduate, where do you go back to? And what are you a part of? Are you ever a part of something bigger than yourself? And then, like, even these schools, there's one, I'm not going to mention the kid's name. It's been 4 schools in 4 years. People have paid him like $2 million a year. The guy's never freaking won a game. Like, he's been to 3 schools and they've had losing records 3 years in a row. Like, and the evaluation. Every bad team has a leading scorer. But yeah, I mean, I am all for the kids getting paid. We've got to find guardrails, and we've got to find a way to put education back in it. And we've got to find a way. And some people say, well, it's not the coach's job to teach that. Well, you know what? When a guy plays for you, all right, if you're doing it right, you become a mentor to that player. And you help build a bridge for them to cross the rest of their life. You help them grow as a person, become a better person, and become a better husband and a better father and a better community member. And you hopefully help them continue to learn the difference between right and wrong, and give and build on the values, hopefully, that their parents set in them when they were growing up. So I take that seriously. So people say, well, it's not, that's, when coaches say, like, well, the kid goes to school four schools for 4 years, that's not good for him. People, that's not your place to make that decision. Well, you know what? When a guy plays for you, all right, if you have a real relationship, that relationship isn't a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year relationship. All right. If you're not mentoring your players, shame on you. because that's part of the job. And that's a bigger part of the job than wins and losses. So uh, I just think we've got to find a way to get some guardrails so that we can give these young people, let them earn money, but also give them the best experience for their lives, not for 6 months.
Those are all fair questions and concerns that you raise. Absolutely. Thinking about some changes or potential changes in college basketball, more so on the court, and we can kind of go rapid fire with these. What are your thoughts on tournament expansion?
I think everyone thinks I'm nuts. We're going to have tournament expansion because when you have 16 and 18 team conferences, you're not going to have 6 and 7 teams from those conferences go to the NCAA tournament. You're just not going to have it. What I think you should do is expand to 72 or 78, whatever the number is, or 70, whatever it is. Then the one bid leagues keep their first, the bottom 16 all play off into first fours, 4 different regions, and the winner of those then gets moved into the second round. It's really the first round, but it's the second round, and that opens up more spots for these mega conferences, because eventually we're going to have 4 mega conferences or 3 mega. I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, you see these athletic departments dropping sports. Why are they dropping sports? There isn't enough money, and you say, well, they're paying the coaches this much money. Like the coach is the CEO. He's the general manager. He's the face of the university. He's the university's best fundraiser. He's also responsible for the product, recruitment. That didn't I swept floors at Columbia. I made like $11,000. All right, I made $62,000 a head coach. I mean, yeah, are people getting paid more money? Yeah, they're getting paid more money right today. But like Ben McCullum, he was driving a bus 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I mean, like, I understand that, but you know, things change. But we've got to find a way. We've got to find. People say, well, coaches go anyway. Yeah, they've hit buyouts. I paid 2 buyouts in my coaching career. You pay buyouts because it's a 2-way contract. I mean, so we've just got to find a way to make it a better experience and help these kids. I mean, like in the end, you're trying to help someone. Not just win games. You're trying to help someone, and that's being lost. People, the coach is just for the money. No. Look, there's good and bad in every walk of life, but 99.9% of coaches are in this thing because they love the game. They love being around the players. They want to help people move on and be successful in life. I mean, that's it. The most aggravated I've ever gotten at players was because guys screwed up academically or socially, made bad decisions, and embarrassed themselves or families in the program, or didn't commit academically and dig in a hole academically. I mean, or were jerks on campus and did things that I thought were wrong. So, I mean, it's the way it is.
Just a couple more potential on-court changes. Your thoughts on shifting men's college basketball to quarters?
Yeah, I think we should. Every other aspect of college of our game is in quarters. Why would we not be in quarters? Women are in quarters, NBA is in quarters, high school's in quarters. Why are we in halves?
And one rule that I'm not a fan of, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on, is advancing the ball on a timeout.
I think we should at the end of the game. We're gonna have more exciting finishes.
And I'd have to ask, good or bad,
Elam
your thoughts
Ending,
on
let's go.
Elam Ending.
Come on,
Does it have a
come on.
place? Does it have a place to experiment?
Hell,
At least in
I
the
think we
NIT or
should.
college basketball crown.
Yeah, I think the NIT would be great. I would think maybe one or 2 of the Feast Week tournaments would be great. I think it'd be good. I mean, like in the end, we want to get our game into a 2-hour window. All right, and I think the one thing we're going to do at the Elam Ending is you set that target number, and now you'll have some long ones because the sphincter tightens up a little bit at the end of those games, as we know. But you got to get stops. Can't foul. Got to get stops. Got to have good possession. It's the strategy that's involved, as we both know. You got the ball, got a lead, you got that timeout. I mean, so I think that I think it's let's put it this way. I think it's been worthwhile. I know they did in the All-Star game, right? I think it's something that is unique. So and I think players like it. makes for great endings. I'm anything that's going to make the end of the game more interesting to me, I think is good for our game. It ends on a made shot.
It's a lot of fun. And one final question here, more on the personal side. At what point in you've had so many chapters of your life and your career, at what point did you reach the point where you could say, my dreams have come true?
Your dreams are always evolving for me. If you dream, if you not continue to dream, then why live? I mean, I'm blessed. I mean, I'm blessed. I got an amazing wife. I got 3 incredible daughters that have been very successful, married good guys. I've chased my dream. I always wanted to coach. I coached in, the Ivy League, the Big East, Conference USA when it was really, really good, the ACC. I've been assistant coach on a Final Four team, take my own teams to the NCAA tournament, beaten 4 number 1 teams in the country 4 times, having 33 years of incredible memories. But I'm not a guy that sits still. I don't know what's my next chapter, I guess. Hopefully I can do this for a couple more years. I mentor a bunch of coaches, and I get a lot of reward out of that. Maybe write a book. I don't know, but I've been incredibly, beyond fortunate. I don't take anything that's happened to me in my life for granted. Like from Christmas, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I really am. I mean, I've been very, very fortunate. Good health. My kids are good. Lost my dad a little early, which is hard. My mom's 98 years old. I'm a very, very fortunate person, and don't take any of it. Zero. I don't take any of it for granted.
Anything else you'd like to share as we wrap up here?
No, I'm good to go, brother.
Okay.
I'm good to go. I got a couple things to get going,
Sure.
and appreciate you having me. Like I said, I thought what you did, with TBT, it's been great. And like man, John Mugar, one of one, the mad scientist.
Coach, thank you so much for your time, your insight,
buddy.
your candor. It's been so fun. So I really appreciate it, and best to you.
You got it, pal. Thanks, bud.
In the innovation segment, we explore innovations of all types in the world of sports and at all stages of implementation and consideration. Remember, if you have an idea for a rule change or innovation that you'd like for me to discuss on a future episode, you can submit that by email, nick.elam@sportsrulepod.com, or X or Instagram @sportsrulepod. In this episode, we discuss the 3-2-1 lottery draft reform, which is a proposal by the NBA to address the tanking epidemic, and as of this recording, is scheduled to be voted on formally at the end of May 2026, with the possibility of being implemented for the 2027 draft. Now, before I get into the specifics of the 3-2-1 lottery reform, it's worth noting that tanking is absolutely a real phenomenon in the NBA, and no one argues that. And tanking is a really bad phenomenon. It violates one of the most fundamental principles of what sports should be. And it's surprising to me that not everyone sees it as a bad phenomenon. Now, many people, including me, have been critical of the NBA because tanking exists. But in all fairness, the NBA already takes greater measures than any other U.S. major sport in preventing tanking, all the way back to the introduction of the draft lottery in the 1980s and the different tinkerings with it since then. But those measures have been ineffective for various reasons. Now, a couple of these reasons are just inherent to the sport of basketball and unique to the sport of basketball, and there's really not much that the NBA or any other governing body could do to legislate it away. That being that in basketball, relative to other sports, one star player can have a drastic and disproportionate effect on a team's overall performance. So that motivates struggling teams to try to move up to get one of the top picks. Also in basketball, there is usually a drastic drop-off in talent level between that first pick or just those very first few picks and then the subsequent picks, which again is further motivation for teams to try to land in one of those first few draft spots. But there is at least one combination of reasons that is reasonably within the control of the NBA that does contribute to tanking. That's the fact that such a high percentage of teams in the NBA are given the right to play beyond the end of the regular season to make the postseason. And There's also draft-related rewards for those teams that don't make the playoffs. So if you're a team that is right on the cusp of making the playoffs, and if you get in, you have this long and very unlikely road to a championship if you're able to get in. Whereas if you miss the playoffs, you might get some sort of draft-related perk that could help you in the future. There's a real conflict for teams that are in that position of whether it's better to actually make the playoffs or not. That is a real problem that contributes to tanking in the NBA. So before I get into the specifics of the 3-2-1 lottery system, it does sound relatively complex when you read about it or hear about it. But when it comes to something like an off-court policy, such as a draft lottery, I don't think that complexity should be a deterrent. Really, it's just if people understand that it's a format that works, that serves its fundamental purposes, no matter how complex it is, then I think it's okay. I wouldn't say the same thing about an on-court playing rule where even if it is effective, if it's super complex, then it could take away from the enjoyment of the game. But when it comes to fixing the lottery or addressing tanking, no matter how complex it is, then that's okay. But I'm just not sure that the 3-2-1 system is the answer. So under the 3-2-1 lottery system, every team will fall into a certain category of how many entries they have into the draft lottery. They'll either get 3 or 2 or 1 or 0 entries into the lottery, which actually end up being ping pong balls that are drawn out. So one category would be if you are a top 6 team in your conference, then you get 0 lottery entries, but you are automatically entered into the main draw of the playoff field. If you are the 7th or 8th best team in your conference, and then you win the 7 versus 8 play-in game, you are now also into the main draw of the playoff field, and you also get 0 lottery entries. If you are the 7th or 8th best team in your conference and you lose that 7 versus 8 play-in game, you get 1 lottery entry, and you still have an opportunity to play your way into the main playoff field. If you are the 9th or 10th best team in your conference, you automatically get 2 lottery entries, and you still have an opportunity through the play-in tournament to play your way into that year's main playoff draw. Now let's look way down in the standings. If you are one of the 3 worst teams in the entire NBA, then you get 2 lottery entries. And the only category that's left then is for teams that fall out of the postseason altogether, but they're better than those worst 3 teams in the NBA. So they're bad, they miss the playoffs, but they're not the absolute worst of the worst. Then you get 3 lottery entries. So every team falls into one of these categories. The intent of the system is that teams will always be trying to win. That big difference is that at the bottom 3 teams in the NBA, they get fewer lottery entries than the teams just above them in the standings. And that's the major difference in this new system because up to this point, the very worst teams in the NBA got the most lottery entries. So again, the spirit is that teams will always be trying to win no matter which of these categories that they fall into or might fall into. I'm not convinced that that is always going to happen. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at some comparisons of some of these different categories to see if this 3-2-1 system will be or is likely to be effective. So let's compare the category of teams where they get the 3 lottery entries. That means they missed the postseason altogether, but they were not one of the worst 3 teams in the NBA, against the category where you are one of the 3 worst teams in the NBA and you only get 2 lottery entries. So when you compare these, yes, it is better to be out of the playoffs, but not one of the 3 worst teams in the NBA. That's better than being one of the 3 worst teams in the NBA. So that is mostly a good thing because teams, it will eliminate, I think, that most egregious tanking that we see at the very bottom of the standings where teams are truly trying to have the worst record in the NBA. I think that will be addressed and curtailed by this. But the problem is that it kind of goes against the fundamental spirit of the way these drafts are supposed to work. These are supposed to be designed to help the most struggling teams, and it needs to at least consider the possibility that the teams with the worst records truly are just the worst teams and that they weren't necessarily trying to make that happen. So this is a little bit tricky because in some ways this is a good comparison that you don't want to be one of the worst teams in the NBA, but it goes against that fundamental spirit that we're trying to help out the worst teams through the draft. So the next comparison I'd like to make are the categories when it comes to teams who are the 7th or 8th best team in their conference. So you might be a 7 or 8 team and you win the play-in game to automatically get into the playoff draw, and you get 0 lottery entries, but hey, you're the 7th seed in the playoffs. Or you could be that 7 or 8 team and lose that play-in game. You get 1 lottery entry, and you still have a second chance to win a game and make it into that year's playoff draw. I would say that it's arguably better to lose that game, that 7 versus 8 play-in game, and then still have a chance to win your way into the playoff field. Automatically get 1 lottery entry. That might be better than winning the 7 versus 8 game. And if that's the case, then that is really, really bad. The NBA has recently introduced the play-in tournament. They obviously want these to be seen as marquee games and high stakes games that teams are trying to win. And I do not think it's out of the question at all that some teams would have little to no motivation to win that 7 versus 8 game because it might actually be better to lose and then you can get your lottery entry and still have a chance to win in the playoff draw. So if teams are not giving it their all to win that 7 versus 8 standalone, nationally televised game leading into the playoffs, that's a real problem and a real possible defect in this 3-2-1 system. The next comparison I'd like to make is teams that finish 9th or 10th in their conference versus teams who finish 7th or 8th. So if you finish 9th or 10th in the conference, then you automatically get 2 lottery entries and you still have a chance to play your way into that year's playoff draw. Whereas, as we've mentioned before, if you finish 7th or 8th, you have a chance and a better chance to play into that year's playoff draw, but you're either going to get 0 lottery entries or 1 lottery entry at the most. Again, I think this is where you could reasonably argue that it's better to finish in the standings 9th or 10th in your conference than it is to finish 7th or 8th. And again, if that is true, or if any team, even if it's not true, but teams think that it's true and they play as if it's true, that's a real problem. It's a real problem if teams are subtly or overtly tanking down the stretch of the regular season because they'd rather finish 9th or 10th in the conference rather than 7th or 8th. And then the last comparison, let's look at teams even higher in the standings. And again, the first 6 teams in the conference, they don't get any lottery entries, but they're automatically into the main playoff draw. And if you're a 1 or a 2 or even a 3 seed, that's great. You're a legitimate title contender. You're not so worried about the lottery entries. You're willing to go a year without that so that you have a chance to go after the title that's potentially right in front of you. But if you're a 4th or 5th or 6th team, yes, you have a shot at the title, but it's a daunting road and a very unlikely road. It's going to take a minor miracle to win the championship that year, and you're not getting any draft lottery entries. So let's think about that and then compare that to a team that finishes 7th, 8th, 9th, or 10th. Those teams, again, they might be able to play their way into the main playoff field or get at least 1 lottery entry or both. Again, I think you could reasonably argue that it's better to be that 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 team compared to, say, a 4 or 5 or 6 seed team. And again, if that's the case, that is a real problem and a real defect in the 3-2-1 lottery system. If teams are trying to finish in the 7 through 10 slot in the standings rather than finishing, say, 6th or 5th or 4th, that's a real problem. Now, again, some of these flaws or some of these arguments you could make with previous draft lottery systems. And I do think the 3-2-1 lottery system, again, as I said before, I think it will be effective in preventing that really egregious tanking that happens at the very bottom of the standings. We won't see that anymore. But again, the price that the league is paying to prevent that is that it could be leaving some of its most genuinely struggling franchises out in the cold without as much help in the lottery system. And what might also be doing is shifting some of the most egregious tanking toward the middle of the standings, which is not necessarily any better. But because of that one area where it is very likely to improve tanking and address tanking, I will give it at least a 2 out of 10 on the good idea scale. Now, there are a few extra stipulations that we haven't gotten into, such as a team can't win the top pick 2 years in a row. There's a few other stipulations like that. I'm okay with some of these. Some of these seem a little bit arbitrary or over-engineered. And again, I think a more elegant system, you wouldn't need these extra stipulations. But overall, I don't have a huge problem with those extra stipulations. So the 3-2-1 lottery proposal, it's not the worst idea in the world, but I do think a better alternative would be a system that considers a team's value or a team's ability over the course of multiple years, where it doesn't incentivize tanking in any way at any position in the standings, and that is open to the possibility that the teams at the very bottom of the standings just genuinely are bad and need help. And the best combination of all those things, the best proposal that I've heard to this point, is a proposal called the COLA draft mechanism. And if you'd like to learn more about COLA, then you can revisit episode 5 of the Sports Rule Pod for more on that proposal by Dr. T.J. Hiley. In the next to last segment, we acknowledge a next to last from the past. And in this episode, we revisit the next to last game by round of the 2026 World Baseball Classic, a semifinal game between the United States and the Dominican Republic, which, while getting a lot of positive publicity at the time, was still underappreciated in my mind, because it could be argued that this was the greatest spectacle in the history of baseball. 2026 was the 6th edition of the World Baseball Classic, and while the first 5 editions were worthwhile and enjoyable, 2026 was a cut above in terms of the quality of the players willing to participate, to the passion of the fans in attendance, to the quality and the drama of the games themselves. The very last game of the 2026 World Baseball Classic, the championship game between the United States and Venezuela, was wonderful in its own right, with Venezuela winning the championship 3-2, and included a 2-out, 2-run tying home run by Bryce Harper in the bottom of the 8th, and a stirring RBI double by Eugenio Suarez in the top of the 9th to give Venezuela the lead that they would hang on to. But the semifinal between the United States and the Dominican Republic, the subject of this next to last segment, was even more noteworthy. It included many future Hall of Famers in the game, including sure bets such as Bryce Harper and Manny Machado, Paul Goldschmidt, Aaron Judge, and almost included Clayton Kershaw too, although he was removed from the U.S. roster just before this game. It included Juan Soto, who is certainly on a Hall of Fame trajectory, still relatively early in his career, and a few very early career players who are on some early Hall of Fame trajectories, such as Paul Skeens and Bobby Witt Jr. and Mason Miller. It even included a few veteran players who will at least get strong consideration for the Hall of Fame when their career is over, including Alex Bregman, Fernando Tatis Jr., Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and Kyle Raleigh. We can even speculate about a few other early career players who have the potential for Hall of Fame ceilings to their career, such as O'Neal Cruz or Julio Rodriguez, Gunnar Henderson and Roman Anthony, who both had a big part in this game for the United States. And there were even a couple dark horse candidates for the Hall of Fame, such as Will Smith and Junior Caminero. And to boot, the Dominican Republic was managed by a future Hall of Famer himself, and Albert Pujols. Now, you could certainly argue that Major League All-Star games have had at least this much collective talent on the roster, but the competitive spirit of a Major League All-Star game does not even come close to the competitive spirit that we see in the World Baseball Classic. And most people, including me, would argue that the stakes of a World Series game are much higher than what they are for a World Baseball Classic. But if you look at the roster of just about any World Series team or the lineup of any World Series team, you'd find a handful of players who would not be good enough to make it onto the roster of these World Baseball Classic teams that we saw for the United States and the Dominican Republic. So this combination, having this much talent on the field for a game this competitive, could make a reasonable claim that this game was the greatest spectacle in the history of baseball, even before the game started. It was actually somewhat of a bonus that the game itself turned out to be so amazing. Now, in this game, the United States was actually the visiting team, even though the game was played in Miami. So the United States batted first. And once the game got started, this game had it all. And that included, for the bottom of the first, the electricity and the anticipation of Paul Skeens taking the mound for the United States. On the other side, Luis Severino had a great start for the Dominican Republic, and that included electrifying back-to-back strikeouts of Aaron Judge and Kyle Schwarber in the top of the third. Now, Judge had his own shining moments that included throwing out Fernando Tatis from right field at third base in the bottom of the third and making a diving catch on a line drive hit by Juan Soto in the bottom of the fourth. However, Judge was robbed of his own offensive shining moment when his deep drive to center field was caught over the wall by Julio Rodriguez in the top of the fifth. And these weren't the only amazing defensive plays in this game, as Bryce Terang and Bobby Witt Jr. both had diving stops in the infield in the first inning and sixth inning, respectively. Now, there was scoring in this game, started by the Dominican Republic and a solo home run by Junior Caminero in the bottom of the second inning, which sparked an epic team and crowd celebration that makes the World Baseball Classic so special. The United States scored in the top of the fourth with rousing home runs by Gunnar Henderson and Roman Anthony to give them a 2-1 lead. Now, that lead would hold up for the rest of the game, but there were still many more noteworthy moments and opportunities to second guess in the game, and that included some perhaps overly cautious base running by Fernando Tatis Jr. in the bottom of the fifth and Austin Wells in the bottom of the seventh, both playing for the Dominican Republic. There were some nail-biting moments as some United States relievers were able to get out of some major jams. That included Tyler Rogers inducing a huge double play ground ball from Juan Soto in the bottom of the fifth, and David Bednar somehow escaping a seemingly impossible jam in the bottom of the seventh. And as if all that wasn't enough, the game included its share of controversy too, as being one of the last games of this magnitude probably ever that did not use the ABS challenge system. Juan Soto was rung up on a controversial third strike call in the bottom of the eighth, and then the game actually ended in the bottom of the ninth with Gerardo Perdomo being rung up on an even more questionable third strike call with the tying run on third base. And that capped off the United States' victory in the semifinal and sent them on to the championship game where they lost to Venezuela. And as amazing as this game was, and it was truly amazing, there might actually be many more opportunities here in the near future to top it and set another greatest spectacle in the history of baseball. There seems to be renewed interest and willingness among star players to participate in these types of international competitions, so we might see it in the World Baseball Classic. We might even see it in the Olympics. The very last thing I'd like to do in this episode is to thank all of you for your engagement with the podcast. Remember, if you have an idea for a rule change or an innovation in sports and you're ready to share it with the world, you can submit that by email, nick.elam@sportsrulepod.com, or X or Instagram @sportsrulepod. Please like or subscribe wherever you find the podcast, and look for Season 1 episodes to be released every 2 weeks on Friday mornings. See you next time.